Before photography became something everyone carried in a pocket, having your portrait made was a serious event. Painted portraits were expensive, slow, and mostly reserved for people with money, status, or a strong reason to preserve their likeness. Early photographic processes changed that, but they were still fragile, formal, and often costly. Then came the tintype, a small image on a thin sheet of darkened metal that could be made quickly, handled easily, and sold cheaply. It was not the sharpest or most elegant photographic process of the 19th century, but that was not the point. Its importance came from access. For the first time, ordinary soldiers, farmers, laborers, families, and frontier settlers could sit for a portrait and leave minutes later with a durable image of themselves. The name tintype is slightly misleading. These photographs were not usually made on tin. They were made on thin sheets of iron coated with a dark lacquer or enamel. That dark surface mattered because the photographic image itself was not a conventional print on paper. It was a direct positive image created in a light-sensitive emulsion on the metal plate. Depending on the angle, the image could look almost ghostly, silver-gray, and reversed, but against the blackened background it appeared as a positive portrait. The process was also known as ferrotype, from the iron support, and melanotype, referring to the dark backing. In the 19th century, people often used the more specific words ferrotype and ferrotypist rather than simply photograph and photographer. The process was introduced in 1853 by Adolphe Alexandre Martin in Paris, at a time when photography was still young and competing methods were evolving quickly. The daguerreotype had already amazed the public with its detailed images on silvered copper plates, but it was delicate and usually kept inside a protective case. The ambrotype, another direct positive process, used glass as its support. Tintype photography borrowed from that world but replaced glass with lacquered metal. That single practical change made a huge difference. Metal did not shatter like glass, did not demand the same protective presentation, and could be handled more casually. It turned photography from a treasured fragile object into something closer to a portable keepsake. To understand why tintypes caught on, it helps to compare them with their rivals. Daguerreotypes were beautiful, detailed, and prestigious, but they were also reflective, delicate, and expensive enough to remain special occasions for many people. Ambrotypes were often cheaper, but they still relied on glass, which made them vulnerable. Tintypes sacrificed some refinement for practicality. They were sturdy, inexpensive, and fast. They did not need elaborate mounting in a hard case, even though some were still presented that way. A customer could hold one, carry one, mail one, or keep one tucked away without the same fear of immediate damage. In a growing, mobile society, especially in North America, that durability mattered as much as artistic perfection. Speed was one of the tintype's greatest advantages. Once the plate was prepared and exposed in the camera, it could be developed, fixed, and handed to the customer within minutes. That immediacy changed the experience of being photographed. Instead of waiting days or dealing with a complicated studio process, a person could sit down, remain still for the exposure, and soon walk away with the finished object. For people who had never owned an image of themselves, that must have felt remarkable. It also made tintypes commercially powerful. A photographer could serve many customers in a day, especially in crowded public places, and the low cost opened the market to people who would never have commissioned a painted portrait. At first, tintypes were often made in formal studios, much like daguerreotypes and ambrotypes. Sitters posed carefully, clothing was arranged, and the image carried the seriousness of a traditional portrait. But the format soon escaped the studio. Ferrotypists. Set up at fairs, carnivals, marketplaces, and on sidewalks. Some worked from tents or booths. Others traveled from town to town, bringing photography to people who did not live near established studios. This mobility helped make the tintype a mass medium. The photographer no longer needed to wait for customers to come through a studio door. The camera could go to the crowd, to the frontier, to soldiers, to families, and to the places where history was unfolding. Tintypes became especially important in North America, where the 19th century was marked by war, expansion, migration, and rapid social change. During the American Civil War, many soldiers had tintype portraits made before going to the front or while in camp. These images were personal objects, often sent home to families or carried as reminders of loved ones. They gave ordinary enlisted men a visual presence in a way earlier generations rarely experienced. Beyond individual portraits, early photographers also documented scenes connected to war and its aftermath. The tintype belongs to that broader photographic moment, when the camera began to fix not only famous leaders and formal ceremonies, but also the faces and circumstances of common people caught in historic events. The tintype also fit the mythology and reality of the American frontier. It was practical for itinerant photographers working from covered wagons or temporary setups. They could photograph farming families standing proudly in front of new homes, settlers at the edge of emerging towns, and people whose lives were defined by movement and uncertainty. Large plates could capture landscapes, buildings, and frontier scenes, while smaller portraits preserved the faces of people building lives far from established centers. In this sense, the tintype was not just a photographic technology. It was a tool for claiming identity. A family in front of a house could say, "We are here, we built this, we belong to this place." This is why the tintype has been described as one of the first truly democratic forms of mass portraiture. Democratic does not mean perfect or equal in every sense. It means the barrier to participation dropped dramatically. More people could afford a portrait. More people could access a photographer. More kinds of lives could be visually recorded. The stiff poses and simple backgrounds of tintypes can make them seem plain today, but that plainness is part of their power. They show people who might otherwise have vanished from the visual record: workers, children, soldiers, migrants, couples, and families. The images often lack the polish of elite portraiture, but they preserve something equally valuable: presence. Even as tintypes spread, photographic technology continued to move forward. By the mid-1860s, albumen prints on paper began to gain artistic and commercial ground. Paper photographs could be produced from negatives, shared in multiple copies, mounted in albums, and presented with a level of tonal quality that tintypes often could not match. As studios adopted newer methods, the tintype gradually lost its place as a leading photographic form. But it did not disappear. Its low cost, toughness, and novelty value kept it alive long after it had been surpassed in quality. What had started as a practical mass portrait medium slowly shifted into a more casual attraction, especially at fairs and carnivals. That long afterlife is revealing. Tintypes remained in use, though less prominently, into the early 20th century and even into the 1930s. By then, photography had changed enormously, but the tintype still offered something distinctive: a physical object with a handmade feel, produced directly on metal. At carnivals, the appeal was partly novelty, but also immediacy. People could still experience the small thrill of watching an image become an object almost on the spot. In a culture increasingly filled with printed photographs, the tintype looked older, rougher, and more tangible. Its survival shows that photographic value is not only about resolution or technical superiority. Sometimes it is about experience, material, and memory. Today, tintype photography has been revived by artists, historical photographers, and enthusiasts who are drawn to its imperfections. In the digital age, where images are infinitely copied, edited, and erased, a tintype feels stubbornly physical. It is a single object, not a file. Its surface, contrast, and slight unpredictability make each image feel unique. That modern revival connects back to the reason tintypes mattered in the first place. They made photography accessible, portable, and personal. They captured faces during war, migration, settlement, celebration, and everyday life. The tintype may have been cheaper and less refined than some rival processes, but its cultural importance was enormous. It helped turn the portrait from a privilege into a possibility. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.